My husband and I celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary just a few months ago. When I look back at our journey together, it feels like a lifetime has passed since we first met 5 years ago. Those early days of dating were filled with so much promise and joy. I remember how my heart would skip a beat every time his name appeared on my phone screen. Back then, everything felt perfect and pure. During our 2 years of dating before marriage, I built a foundation of trust that felt unshakable. I knew his phone password from the beginning because he gave it to me freely, but I never felt the need to use it. Not once did I scroll through his messages or check his call history. Why would I? This was the man who held my hand during my father's funeral, who surprised me with flowers on random Tuesday afternoons, who talked about our future children with stars in his eyes. I trusted him from the top of my head to the tips of my toes. Every fiber of my being believed in his loyalty and love. Our wedding day was everything I had dreamed of since I was a little girl. The way he looked at me as I walked down the aisle made me feel like the only woman in the world. His vows brought tears to everyone's eyes, especially when he promised to honor and cherish me above all others. I believed every word. Why wouldn't I? This was my person, my forever, my safe place in a chaotic world. The first year of marriage flew by in a blur of shared dinners, weekend adventures, and quiet nights on the couch. We were building our life together brick by brick. I learned how he liked his coffee in the morning. 2 sugars, just a splash of milk. He learned that I needed complete silence for the first 10 minutes after waking up. We found our rhythm, our dance, our way of being us. Then came our first anniversary. I had spent weeks planning the perfect celebration. I bought a new dress, made reservations at the restaurant where we had our first date, and even wrote him a letter expressing all the ways he had made me a better person. The universe seemed to be smiling on us because just days before our anniversary, I discovered I was pregnant. The joy I felt was indescribable. Our family was growing, our love was multiplying, our dreams were coming true. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. A few days after our anniversary dinner, I needed to send an important work document from his phone to mine. My phone had died, and his was right there on the kitchen counter. Such a simple, innocent moment that would change everything. As I picked up his phone and entered the password I had known for years but rarely used, a message notification popped up on the screen. The preview showed just enough words to make my stomach drop. My hands started shaking as I sent my document, trying to ignore what I had seen, but I couldn't. After the document was sent, my fingers moved almost without my permission, opening that message thread. What I found shattered my world into a million pieces. There, in black and white, was evidence that my husband had been intimate with his colleague. The messages were explicit, leaving no room for misinterpretation. They talked about meeting up, about how good it felt, about doing it again. My legs gave out, and I found myself sitting on the kitchen floor, still clutching his phone, reading message after message that destroyed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The timing couldn't have been worse. My pregnancy was already complicated. The doctor had warned me about stress, told me I needed to stay calm for the baby's sake. But how could I stay calm when my entire world was crumbling? I spent that night in the bathroom, alternating between throwing up from morning sickness and sobbing until my eyes were swollen shut. When he came home from work that evening, I was sitting on our bed with his phone in my lap. The look on his face when he saw me told me everything. He knew I knew. The man who usually had a smile and a kiss for me stood frozen in the doorway like a deer caught in headlights. The conversation that followed was one of the hardest of my life. He cried, something I had only seen him do twice before. He blamed the alcohol, said it was a terrible mistake that happened after an office party. He swore it meant nothing, that it was just one time, that he loved only me. We even prayed together, both of us blaming the devil for this temptation that had destroyed our perfect marriage. He held my hands and promised it would never happen again, that he would do whatever it took to earn back my trust. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. I was carrying his child, building the family we had dreamed about. So I chose to try. I chose to forgive. I chose to move forward. But forgiveness and forgetting are two very different things, and while I could offer the first, the second seemed impossible. Just when I was starting to find my footing again, another blow came. While looking for a photo on his phone to show his mother, I stumbled across a chat with his ex-girlfriend. My heart sank as I read their conversation. There it was, in his own words. Marrying her was a mistake. The her was me, his wife, the mother of his unborn child. When I confronted him about this, he laughed it off. He said it was just a joke, a way to get back at his ex for how badly things had ended between them. He said he was trying to make her jealous, to show her that he had moved on even if he hadn't. But those words haunted me. Even as a joke, how could he say that about our marriage? About us? I tried to be understanding. I tried to see it from his perspective. Maybe he was just being petty with an ex. Maybe it really was a poor attempt at humor. But combined with the cheating, it felt like another crack in the foundation of our relationship. Still I stayed. Still I tried. Still I loved him. After these incidents, I made what I thought were reasonable requests. I asked him to be more careful about his relationships with female colleagues. I suggested he should maintain professional boundaries at work. I asked him to consider how his friendships with other women might look from my perspective, especially given what had happened. These didn't seem like unreasonable requests from a wife who had been betrayed, but he saw things differently. He said I was being controlling, that I was letting my insecurity ruin his friendships. He insisted that he needed female friends, that it was normal and healthy. And maybe he was right, but when trust is broken, what seems normal to one person can feel threatening to another. What hurt most was that he didn't seem to understand why I was struggling. He expected me to simply move past it, to trust him again as if nothing had happened. When I explained that rebuilding trust takes time and effort from both people, he would get frustrated. He said I was choosing to live in the past, that I was letting one mistake define our entire relationship. Meanwhile, I noticed he was still in regular contact with multiple ex-girlfriends. Not just casual, happy birthday messages, but deep, meaningful conversations. They would share their problems with each other, seek advice, offer comfort. He would send them videos of himself at the gym or doing activities, and they would send similar videos back. It felt intimate in a way that made me uncomfortable. When I brought this up, he accused me of being jealous and insecure. He said these women were just friends, that I was making something out of nothing. But how could I not worry when he had already shown me that his boundaries with female colleagues could be crossed? Then there was social media. I started noticing his activity more. Not because I was stalking him, but because it was hard to miss. He would comment on photos of women in bikinis or tight dresses, leaving fire emojis and compliments. He would message random women, striking up conversations that seemed flirty to me. When I asked about it, he said I was being paranoid, that commenting on photos meant nothing, that I was making him feel like a prisoner in his own marriage. The cycle continued. I would notice something that made me uncomfortable, I would bring it up, and it would turn into a huge fight. He started deleting his messages with female friends, not because he was hiding anything, he claimed, but because he knew I would overreact if I saw them. He said he was doing it to prevent fights, but to me it felt like he was hiding something. Last year, my suspicions peaked again. Something about his behavior felt off. He was protective of his phone in a way he hadn't been before, always making sure it was face down, taking it with him even to the bathroom. One evening, while he was in the shower, I gave in to my anxiety and looked through his phone. In his deleted photos folder, I found a screenshot that made my blood run cold. It was a conversation where he was asking a woman to choose between him and another man. The message was flirty, suggestive, completely inappropriate for a married man to send. My hands were shaking as I heard the shower turn off. When I confronted him, his first response wasn't to explain or apologize. Instead, he was angry that I had gone through his phone. He said I had violated his privacy, that I had no right to look through his deleted photos. When I pressed about the actual content of what I found, he claimed it was a prank. He said a male colleague had asked him to send that message as a joke, to help him test if a woman was interested. The explanation made no sense. Why would a married man agree to such a thing? Why would he risk his marriage for someone else's prank? And why was the screenshot in his deleted folder if it was just an innocent joke? When I pointed out these inconsistencies, he just got angrier. He said I was looking for problems where none existed, that I was determined to paint him as a villain. That fight was one of our worst. He said things that cut deep, accused me of being crazy, of ruining our marriage with my paranoia. He said I was the reason he felt trapped, that my constant suspicion was pushing him away. I tried to explain that my suspicion came from his actions, from the trust he had broken, but he wouldn't hear it. After that incident, the dynamic in our marriage shifted even more. He became more secretive but also more defiant. He would openly text female friends in front of me, almost daring me to say something. When I would ask who he was texting, he would say just a friend, in a tone that suggested I should drop it. But how could I drop it when my gut was screaming that something wasn't right? The deleted messages became a regular thing. He admitted he was deleting conversations on purpose, not because they contained anything inappropriate, but because he wanted me to know he was deleting them. It was his way of protesting what he saw as my invasion of his privacy. He said if I was going to go through his phone anyway, he might as well delete everything, so I had nothing to find. This logic baffled me. If the conversations were innocent, why not leave them? Why play these games? Every time I noticed him getting close to a new female colleague or reconnecting with an old female friend, I would feel that familiar knot in my stomach. I would try to approach it calmly, to express my concerns without starting a fight, but it always ended the same way. He would get defensive, accuse me of being controlling, say I was trying to isolate him from half the population. The verbal abuse during these fights was something I never expected from the man I married. He would call me names, say I was pathetic for not being able to get over the past, tell me I was the one ruining our marriage. He would storm out, sometimes not coming home until late at night, leaving me to wonder where he was and who he was with. On 3 separate occasions, during particularly bad fights, he told me he wasn't happy in our marriage anymore. He said I had turned into someone he didn't recognize, someone who was suspicious and controlling and impossible to please. Each time those words felt like a knife to my heart. Here I was, trying to save our marriage, trying to rebuild what he had broken, and he was telling me I was the problem. When I would remind him that this all started with his cheating, with his betrayal, he would dismiss it. He said I had chosen to forgive him, so I couldn't keep bringing it up. He said I was using his one mistake as a weapon against him, that I was punishing him indefinitely for something he couldn't take back. But I wasn't trying to punish him. I was trying to heal, and I needed his help to do that. He refused to see it that way. In his mind, we had a perfect marriage that I was ruining with my insecurity. He actually used those words. Perfect marriage. How could he call it perfect when I was in so much pain? How could he call it perfect when trust, the very foundation of marriage, was shattered? He started bringing religion into it more and more. He would say that Satan was using me to destroy our marriage, that I was letting the devil win by not moving past his infidelity. He would quote scripture about forgiveness, about letting go of the past, about trusting in God's plan. But nowhere in those scriptures did it say that the person who broke trust had no responsibility to help rebuild it. I began to question myself constantly. Was I being unreasonable? Was I letting one mistake define our entire relationship? Was I the one sabotaging our happiness? These thoughts kept me up at night, made me second-guess every concern I raised, every boundary I tried to set. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was the problem. But then I would remember the pain of discovering his betrayal. I would remember the messages with his ex, calling our marriage a mistake. I would remember the deleted screenshots, the constant contact with other women, the refusal to acknowledge my pain or help me heal. And I would know, deep down, that my feelings were valid. The pregnancy that had started during such a turbulent time resulted in our beautiful child, who is now a toddler. Becoming parents added another layer to our complicated relationship. On one hand, watching him with our child showed me a tender side of him that reminded me why I fell in love. On the other hand, it made me even more desperate to fix our marriage, to give our child the stable, loving home they deserved. But the patterns continued. He would still maintain close friendships with women that felt inappropriate to me. He would still delete messages, still get defensive when I expressed concerns, still blame me for the problems in our marriage. The cycle was exhausting. Suspicion, confrontation, fight, temporary peace. Repeat. I tried everything I could think of. I suggested marriage counseling, but he said we didn't need it, that our problems would go away if I just stopped going through his phone. I bought books about rebuilding trust after infidelity, but he refused to read them, saying I was the only one who needed to change. I even tried to ignore my suspicions, to just trust blindly, but the anxiety ate me alive. The truth is, I don't recognize the man I married anymore. Or maybe I never really knew him at all. The man who stood at the altar and promised to forsake all others seems like a stranger now. The man who told me I was his everything now tells me I'm the reason he's unhappy. The man who broke my trust now blames me for not being able to fix it on my own. I find myself wondering, what would have happened if I had never looked at that first message? Would he have continued cheating? Would I have lived in blissful ignorance? Sometimes, in my darkest moments, I think that might have been better. But then I remind myself that living a lie is no way to live at all. The questions that plague me are endless. Am I wrong for wanting him to help me heal from the pain he caused? Am I unreasonable for asking him to maintain better boundaries with other women? Am I controlling for being uncomfortable with him maintaining close friendships with ex-girlfriends and colleagues he's shown he can't maintain appropriate boundaries with? He says I broke my own heart by going through his phone, but didn't he break it first by betraying our vows? He says there's nothing broken between us. But how can that be true when I cry myself to sleep wondering if he's deleting messages again? He says we have a perfect marriage that I'm ruining. But what's perfect about a relationship built on broken trust and blame? I've kept this relationship going despite everything. I've stayed through the cheating, the lies, the emotional abuse, the blame. I've tried to forgive, to move forward, to rebuild. But I can't do it alone, and he seems unwilling or unable to understand that. He wants me to simply forget, to pretend it never happened, to trust him blindly again. But trust once broken doesn't work that way. So here I am, 3 years into a marriage that feels like a battlefield, asking strangers for perspective because I've lost all sense of what's normal, what's reasonable, what's right. Am I the problem? Am I asking too much? Or am I simply a woman trying to heal from betrayal while married to a man who refuses to acknowledge the wound he inflicted? I need to know. Am I wrong for feeling this way? Am I unreasonable for wanting my husband to help me rebuild the trust he broke? Am I controlling for being uncomfortable with his relationships with other women after he's already crossed that line once? Please, tell me the truth, because I no longer trust my own judgment in this marriage that has left me questioning everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and commitment.